I'm telling you, we're not messing around with crappy protein pancakes, only the good stuff. Today we are making banana protein pancakes. No protein powder required. These legit, if you didn't know they were protein, you'd think they were regular pancakes. Plus, I can show you how I eat them to keep my blood sugar stable using results from my CGM. I've got all of my ingredients ready to go, so let's get cooking. Starting with our dry ingredients, I have all-purpose flour, ground cinnamon, baking powder. I've got the full printable recipe down below. And then one of my sneaky healthy ingredients that you won't even notice is there is some ground flaxseed. Flaxseed is an outstanding source of omega-3 fatty acids and also soluble and insoluble fiber, which we're gonna talk more about fiber on this channel in an upcoming video, so stay tuned. Whisk that together, and then next, we're gonna get to the blender. We're gonna add some milk, and I'm using whole milk. You can use 2% or a non-dairy milk. I'm just a fan of whole milk because I do find that having more fat in my diet is helpful from a standpoint of macronutrient balance and blood sugar regulation. All those years of fat-free, just really, I don't think we're doing us any favors. Got a little vanilla, 1 whole egg, the last banana in the house. I wanted to make this recipe for you today, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, do I have bananas? We had one. And it's perfectly ripe. Don't worry, if you're looking at this and going, oh my gosh, we're putting bananas in, we're adding carbs, all these things. Don't worry, we'll balance it out. All right, and so now the all-important cottage cheese. If you are not a cottage cheese person, never fear, we're blending it. You won't end up with lumps in your pancake. Now, of course, the cottage cheese is what brings the higher protein content into these pancakes. All right, lid on, and away we go. Give it a look, nice and smooth. All we have to do is then take our dry ingredients, mix in the wet. Now this recipe is great for weekend meal prep because you can double the recipe, and then whatever you have left over, just layer them up between sheets of parchment paper or wax paper. That just prevents them from sticking to each other. And then stick them in a container or some sort of bag. You can keep it in the fridge or in the freezer. And then when you're ready to cook them up, just stick them in the toaster for like 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, so as with all pancakes, we wanna make sure not to overmix. We don't wanna develop a bunch of gluten and make these too tough. But now let it sit for about 5 minutes. Because we have that flaxseed in there, we need to give the flax an opportunity to absorb some of the liquids and activates the baking powder so that when we go to cook them on the griddle, they're nice and fluffy. I've got my electric griddle preheated to around 325 degrees Fahrenheit, like a medium high. Of course, by the nature of pancakes, we're gonna have to put one down and see how it goes. I'd also do this on the stovetop. I just like the griddle because we can do a lot more, a lot quicker. Now, there are also a lot of schools of thought as it relates to pancakes and griddles, and do we butter it or do we do a dry pan? As you can tell, I am a dry pan fan. You could totally put some butter or some coconut oil down. You're gonna get more of that latticey sort of texture to your pancake, but I like kind of that smooth texture. Okay, but of course we just do one and then we see how it goes. And now sometimes I do get lucky on the first one. You're here, so I'm feeling good about it. All right, we're starting to get those larger bubbles, not just the baby bubbles. You wanna wait for the bigger bubbles, and it starts to get just a little drier around the edge. It doesn't look quite as wet. Tells me it's time to flip. Oh! Look who's a pro. Also, do you see this rise factor? Do you see that? And then I put the cooked ones on a cooling rack so that they don't get soggy, because if you just put them straight on a plate, all that condensation starts to absorb and they can get sad. All right, now show off our final product. They smell so good. But let me show you how I serve these up. Now, of course, everybody's biology is gonna be unique. I'm over here with the N of 1 CGM data. But for me personally, if I were to eat this straight up, like maybe put some maple syrup on it and eat that, it would spike my blood sugar because of the carbohydrates in these. But the good news is we can pair these up with some other foods, some other things to help balance out the macronutrients. Now, if you're new to the idea of macronutrients and specifically how they work together for blood sugar balance, I have a resource below you can go check out. But essentially the idea is that we want to balance out the carbohydrates, which I love a carbohydrate, but we want to balance that out with some fiber, fat, and protein, ultimately supporting more stable blood sugar and in turn, more stable energy. Now for me personally, I like turning pancakes into like a whole situation, adding yogurt, specifically Greek yogurt, which is higher in protein. That combined with the protein that's in the pancakes kind of puts this over the top so as to help cushion those carbohydrates. If you're not a fan of plain Greek yogurt, you absolutely can go with a sweetened version, but do just keep in mind the amount of sugar that's in there. This is sweetened with stevia, which is going to be a lot gentler on blood sugar compared to like a cane sugar. And then I also love to add walnuts or some sort of nuts or seeds, which contain fiber, fat, and protein. Also a good crunch factor to break things up texture-wise. If I hadn't used up my last banana, I could also add some banana to this, which would add more fiber. And last but not least, absolutely mandatory to me when it comes to pancakes is we have to have some sort of syrup. But of course, traditional maple syrup is gonna be apt to spike blood sugar. And so in this case, this is my personal favorite brand. I am not sponsored, I'm not being paid for this. I've literally tried every brand of syrup out there, and this one's my favorite because it doesn't taste weird, doesn't have any adverse digestive effects, and texture-wise, it has like the viscosity of traditional maple syrup. And that right there is a respectable stack of pancakes. But most importantly, tested this out with my continuous glucose monitor, and you can see the results right here. We had a nice subtle rise and came right back down. It didn't go spiking way up and crashing back down. That's whenever you have something sugary and you feel that crash, and then sometimes you also then get snacky. That's a blood sugar crash. I know it's a Tuesday afternoon, but this feels like a Saturday morning. Protein pancakes that are actually delicious, and you can get the recipe. I've got it linked down below. And if you make these, let me know how it goes. I want to hear. Keep me in the loop.